In this episode, we speak to Ali Mafi, who commenced his engineering career in 1980 at Terminal 4, ascending to project management, but found the role unfulfilling due to its lack of intellectual challenge and the prevalence of counterproductive behaviors. That was very PC of him to say that. By 2004, he had co-founded Lean Thinking Limited, joined Build of Site, and supported the first BIM trial project. His extensive involvement in over 200 projects globally is marked by his commitment to experimenting with and applying various improvement initiatives. I'll also mention that he's obviously kicked off Timist, the project delivery system, which we did talk and touch on a little bit. Dale, how was that for you, mate?
It was great. Just, I guess, touching on the pod before we touch on being in person again. I think Ali's fantastic. I've spoken to him offline numerous times, and he doesn't mince his words. He has a very decorated career. He certainly has formulated his thoughts, as he calls them, has many light bulb moments along his career journey. And I think the listeners will find this one pretty fascinating. He doesn't pull any punches. He's not afraid to challenge. And we need more people like that.
Absolutely.
And he even, on record, has asked for anyone to come and debate him. So if you're that person and you're listening, please take him up on it. But we thoroughly enjoyed it. We tried to poke the bear a little bit, and he bit here and there, which was fantastic too. So we really, really appreciate his time. But yeah, it's great to see you in person as well, Val.
It's great to see you as well, mate. Back in the Middle East, doing our thing. Project Controls Expo, Middle East was fantastic. Come check us out.
Yeah, come check us out indeed. But look, folks, as we say, we'll leave it there. So keep listening, keep liking, and keep paying it forward.
Hello, project people. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Project Chatter podcast. And we are here. We are live together for the second podcast, face-to-face, back in the Middle East with my friend, Dale Fung. Actually, I don't know if I like this being too close, but how are you, Dale? Are you good?
I'm good, thank you. It's great to see you again in the flesh. You never change, which is great. Well, you change your clothes, I think, but other than that, it's great, yeah.
Very good. No, it's good to have you here. We just finished the Project Controls Expo in the Middle East. The first one actually in UAE went very, very well, didn't it? That's why we're wearing hats today, I guess, because the weather's finally cleared up. But let's introduce our guest, our esteemed guest. I think a lot of people are interested in hearing from you, Ali, and your first time on the pod. How are you, Ali Mafi?
I'm very good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me along.
It is our absolute pleasure. Now, usually we go straight into the detail, but for special guests, we reserve a place and some time to talk about their history and their background. And we were just talking before we press record about your significant history and projects. Ali, give us your version of where it all began for you in projects, and we'll take it from there.
My journey in construction started on Terminal 4 as a junior trainee engineer. As it happens, I worked with two South African guys, and one of them did not like using the theodolite. He had this thing of, throwing his arms wide and then standing there and then slapping into the middle. I don't know if you know the technique.
So yeah, sounds about right.
So that's where the peg goes, and I go, "Oh no, we can't rely on that." Anyway, and then there was the other South African who went off sick, and so I picked up his survey book, and I'm flicking through this, and there are all these letters and numbers, series of letters and numbers, and I'm thinking, why does he put letters in here? AB962 or AF. J785. So I go running up to my senior engineer and go, I don't understand these coordinates. He looks at them and he stands there. He goes, they're not coordinates. They're he's been plane watching. He's been writing down, standing behind the theodolite, watching all those planes. So I had a brilliant time. We were doing the civils work, and we had a van. We were just crashed around racing. It was a huge area we were covering. So we crashed around there. And from there, I went on to a few building projects, in the city, and sort of worked my way up. Then on one project, we had a project manager who was, on reflection, was very diligent. He spent quite a bit of time sitting in the office, planning, thinking, whatever. And I was out and about as his assistant, shouting and screaming. After about 3 weeks, they came to me and said, this guy, does he ever get out? I said, well, not very often. So the next thing is he gets the sack and I get his job, because that's what they wanted me to do. They wanted somebody to be out and about, none of this sitting around planning. And so then I went on to another job, and that's where, after about 6 months, thinking, this really, do I want to continue on in this kind of role? I seem to spend most of my time, nothing seems to work. Nothing arrives on time. And when it does, it's not the right thing, the right color, the right shape, the right size. And at that time, most of the operatives were labor only. So it wasn't just a problem of the material. It was also, was the guy skilled? Was he the right guy? Was it, you had to keep an eye on so many things. And, you're always constantly on the phone, progress chasing. I thought, well, this is not very intellectually engaging. And then people used to come to site and then say, oh, why have you thought of this? Why haven't you done that? And the way they used to sort of say it, in accusatory, I thought, I'm working here 12 hours a day, 7 till 7, and Saturdays as well. This is just not for me. I love being an engineer. It was quite challenging, exciting. And then I thought, right, I've had enough. So I left all that. I remember the guy, he said, no, why are you leaving? Tell us, we'll do whatever you say. I said, I really don't know what is right and how it should be, but this just doesn't seem right. So then I left, did an MBA, got involved with the automotive industry for a short while, looking at life cycle cost, looking at a bit of their production system, their productivity, how they were measuring that. And then I did a couple of other things and then went back to construction. I got a call from somebody saying, Alpha Beta recruiting, why don't you come back to construction? So I had 3 interviews and I thought, this is all going to be different. I'm not going to tell you what it was like. Anyway, I joined Balfour's. It was the same, just a bigger scale.
Yeah.
So the same bloody whatever chaos. So I joined Balfour's and moved around within Balfour's, and then I got a call saying, look, we're going to set up this business improvement team. And, you would fit in, you got your MBA, you've done a bit in the automotive industry, what, do you want to join it? And I went, I do, for sure. So then I joined this team of 5, some absolutely brilliant guys, some very smart guys. It was led by a chap called Martin Print, who was brought in from the manufacturing with a sort of TQM knowledge and background. And then I had a chap called Neil Buttrell, who's retired, and Dave Madigan, who has works for Boeing now. And we then spent probably about 6 years. I mean, our boss at the time, Martin, you say, you can, if there's something interesting you want to read, a book or whatever, just bring it in, read it. You can sit here, read it. So we used to just, we used to read everything that was coming out, the goal, the machine that changed the world, and this and that. So, and we were started off doing lots of Deming stuff, TQM systems, sort of view, SPC, statistical process control. I mean, everybody's talking about data, this and that. We were just gathering data. We were doing Paretos, fishbone diagrams, process mapping, a whole lot. We had a lovely process mapping software, which went bust. And then we came across Mr. Semler, Ricardo Semler, and Maverick. Have you come across him? Have you heard of Maverick? No. Anyway, he's a Brazilian guy.
I'm a bit of a Maverick.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Maverick is about the story of this man who took over from his sort of industrial sort of factory took over from his father, and then he decided he couldn't, this sort of sitting at the top command and control was not for him. So then he just turned the whole thing upside down and created an environment where there are no rules. Basically, people just came and went. And he showed that by doing that, productivity, performance, everything went up. He allowed people to take the equipment home, saying, yeah, take it home as long as you produce what we want, and you can then use it to produce whatever you want as well and sell it. Good luck to you. That sort of, and he got to a stage when he was allowing his people to set their own salary. It's very, very interesting.
Wow.
So we wanted to go to Brazil to see him at the time when everybody wanted to go to Japan to see Toyota. So that's how I was. And at the time, this team was set up, as I said, he was a pioneering, and I think everybody was focused on the QA 5750 when we were doing all this other stuff. And we set up some self-managing frontline teams on one of our major infrastructure projects, live motorway extension and expansion, and it worked really well. So we actually did test a lot of things. And then we had quite a lot of training from the Goldratt Institute.
Yep.
Then we met Eli Goldratt, and he came along and he said he wanted to trial his critical chain on the Alpha BT project. So that's before he published a book that was trialed on one of our projects. So, we had a few light bulb moments working with him. We met then Glenn Ballard, and then so we kept testing different things on different projects, different types of leaderships, and all this stuff people are talking about now. After all that, I then went to Balfour Beatty Rail for a couple of years. The whole team got disbanded, and I'll explain to you later why. I went to Balfour Beatty Rail as a regional manager, rail maintenance. Is an interesting scenario there because, people talk about data. It is a place with just inordinate amount of data collection. Because the way the contract was, there was a big pot of money, £70 million bonus, that was on the table, and you would have that bonus if you didn't lose any of it. But every minute there was a delay. Every minute there was a delay, there will be a deduction. And I think it was £70 a minute for the passenger lines, and about 30 for the sort of the freight sidings sort of lines. So everything was recorded to the second, honestly. In this 24-hour control room, we had every possible type of data, for delays you can think about. So I get there, and at first few meetings, we're talking about the amount of money we've lost, the amount of delays, and I go, okay, what was the reason? They go, oh, sheep on the line, trolley on the line. And I go, okay, fair enough. And then I think, okay, I'm going to go down. I hadn't been downstairs to this control room yet. So I go down there and I start chatting to them and say, can you give me a printout of the last couple of months? So he gives me this printout of the delays, and I'm looking at this, and I'm looking like sheep on the line, which is really difficult for us to control, is around 2%. Trolley on the line, which is, again, vandals and whatever, about 1%. Points failures, 30%. Track circuit failures, 30%. So I rush back upstairs and I go, guys, why are we talking about trolleys and sheep when we got 60% of our delays are caused? Oh yeah, we're looking at all that. But I say you didn't mention it, and we didn't discuss it. So anyway, so that was an interesting start. And the next thing was there was a lot of animosity between the way the whole maintenance works, because you got track walkers, inspectors, who walk the track and then record things. all the faults, and then comes back and then goes into a computer, and then it given a risk priority, and then 2 weeks later is then allocated some norms to it, and then they were issued a list every day, and then they couldn't find it. When they found it, they didn't think it was risky enough to work on it. It was just painful. So we were then we got a call with each region, with the 4 regions that were being owned by Balfour Beatty, that we had to identify the financial risk. How much of backlog of work was there, and how much of it was high priority, and how much what the value would be. So the 4 of us went away, came back, and the first guy said, we've got this amount thing, it's about 150 grand. The other guy said, it's 200 grand. Came to me, I said 0. And this senior director looked at me and went, what do you mean 0? I said 0. There's no financial, there are no high risk faults. He went, sorry, did you not understand what I asked for? I said, I think I understood what you asked for. He said, are you telling me we don't have any high-risk activities on your... I said, well, since you were last here, we repaired them all. He said, how could you repair all that? I said, well, actually, we didn't repair them all. I walked with the guys and made them explain to me why they were high priority. I worked with the civils guys who do the work and the inspectors and saying, why is this high priority? Explain. And then it transpired. Most of them were not actually high priority, and trains were not going to come off the line. So we then, whatever we agreed was high priority, we repaired, which was only about 15%, if I remember. And so that's what I reported. So that did not go down very well. So from then onwards, I was not very popular. Anyway, so what we did was we actually put the gangs together. We said, this is crazy, all this process. So, based on my knowledge of sort of continuing one-piece flow and whatever, I said, look, you've got to do, the key is that it has to be continuous flow. You've got to pick up the fault, repair the fault, not patch it up and then, then decide how to prioritize it and all the work that went with it. Endless amount of effort. So they went, no, you can't do that. You can't walk. And then if there's a broken rail, then you can't carry a rail, 20-meter rail on your shoulder. So I thought, okay, that's fair enough. Then I sort of thought, okay, how often does that happen? Not very often. Okay. So then we said, can you give me a list of all the things that you do repair? And then it transpired about 80% of it you could actually walk and repair. So that meant the inspectors had to get their hands dirty, and the civils guys loved that, and then they all then started actually getting on really well. So that's became this sort of, I don't know if they continued on with that or not. So that's what happened there. After that, I got this call saying that Martin Print, who was my boss at Balfour, who was the leader, he was working for the DTI on the KPIs, which became. So he gave me a call saying, look, there's this team set up called Movement for Innovation, and they're looking for people who are into ideas and change and whatever. Do you want to come and join it? So that's when I joined M4I. I guess you guys are too young to remember M4I. M4I basically was on the back of Egan's report. Movement for Innovation was Egan's sort of thing that people had to start applying, that whatever was the recommendations were. And so I became a regional advisor for that. But then I also got involved with helping with the national KPIs. We talk again about collecting data. I mean, that's exactly what we did. We set up these 10 KPIs and managed to get sort of feedback or people actually using them across most government departments and most local authorities. So, and none of it was hidden. All this thing about data, whatever security or protection. And then I had to go and trying to audit some of this and say, and it transpired that a lot of it was manipulated to sort of allow for all the changes that were made. But the idea was not to extend it. And all the ones that showed any sort of benefit were basically all, Egan's report. Dan Jones, who wrote the Lean Thinking book, he was involved with the Egan report. He was one of the co-authors, and there was a lot about lean in there. But there was none of that. All they did was set up partnering contracts, run a little team working event, created a charter. Then I used to take the maker and say, "Where is your charter?" And then I go, "Oh, what? That's not going to work. It's not laminated." has to be in a frame and laminated, and it has to be in the reception. It ain't going to work. So anyway, and then there was all the time, the client would say, "Oh yeah, the contractor agreed to do this and that for nothing." And like, hold on, that's not innovation. You've guaranteed him a run of work, and now he's doing a few favors back. That's not. You actually have not done anything different. What are you going to do in the next project? So, and then I was helping with offsite. I was actually taking the minister, the housing minister, and the construction minister around a few of the factories, some of which had gone bust recently. Caledonia was a brilliant place. So it was that, and then I also set up started doing the lean training, lean thinking workshops, which were really very popular. And at the end of these workshops, people would say, "We like the sound of that. Can you come and help us?" And I'd go, "No, I can't. I'm not allowed. We're not allowed to provide any consultancy." So it got to a stage when I said to the bosses at M4I, "Look, why don't I just do less days for you then and start doing some, I'd quite like to go on these projects." And they said yes. So it started 1 day a week, then it became 2, it became 3, and before long it became 5 days. So that's when I set up Lean Thinking Limited. And when I set all that up, and then most of actually what we were doing, there was 3 of us. Majority of it was based on critical chain and TOC.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went on to projects, thought, okay, all we have to do is help set up a buffered program, set up the charts, talk to them about one-piece continuous flow and how they should do that, and then job done. We go on to the next project, and the next minute, you think, can we see a copy of the program? Ooh, we don't know. Okay, then I guess send this PDF. And always with a sort of I don't know what's the word, disclaimer saying this is not a complete program.
Draft.
Why is it that there's never a program? I've been involved, as I say, with so many projects. Often I get called in halfway through the project, and after a lot of phone calls and email exchanges between the manager and the planners, eventually a program PDF gets sent to me which says we are 6 weeks behind that. I go, I don't want to see this in a PDF and 6 weeks behind. I want to see the actual position in an actual software that I can use and read. So anyway, and then in those days, some of that has changed now. I think there are 2 of us would take some credit for that. Most of the programs were based around resources. I don't know if you remember, if it was, for example, a hospital was, each sort of room. No, it was carpenter, room 1, room 2, room 3, room 4, room 5. It wasn't based on sort of the logic, the sequence of work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was based purely on, on resource. And we say, well, this, you can't use this for this purpose. You got to say room 1, first fix, second fix, do this, do that, do this, clean, snag, finish, handover. So then we had to do all of that. And then we said, okay, how often do you update and reschedule? Oh, we don't reschedule. All right, okay. So why are you using this software? Why do people use this, planning software when the only functionality of any value that it provides is not used? Is still beyond me. And then I say, so, and then there's all this, oh yeah, I walk around and I add the percentage complete. I said, well, that doesn't tell you where you're at. So I said, look, this has got to be updated at least weekly, and you've got to produce all the reports. Well, we can't do that. I said, well, this is not going to work then. So we then ended up actually taking control of the software and getting people to do the analysis and the update in the background and all of that, and visiting the site, updating on the day. We got to a point where we were actually updating programs in about an hour, when the people were taking a day or 2 days. One major project that was on, it was 2 weeks. Just imagine driving along with somebody sitting next to you without a sat nav, with a map, trying to work out where you are. And an hour after you're into your journey, you will say, oh yeah, that was junction 6 we passed about 20 minutes ago. Like, what? Where are we now?
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, we then ended up taking over that, and that has caused a lot of, for me, has been the main obstacle for progressing things, because that obviously, treading on the toes of the quite highly turf guard department within construction companies, touching the program was not the thing to do. So, but we persisted, because again, every time you say, okay, you do it, update it, send the thing out, copy it to everyone, which was the other obstacle, because most contractors do not allow programs to be shared. I guess you're aware of that.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
so
we know
there's
the reasons why, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a program that, we're trying to get to people to follow, that nobody's allowed to see. And everybody's got their own program. And there's about, some of these major projects, how many? There must be at least 30 programs, 20 planners. And there's also lots of this sort of weekly schedules people together. And then there's the RAG system, and there is this and that, Excel spreadsheet. And then we say, why isn't project finishing on time? So all of that had to stop when we got involved. None of that, everything, one system, one place, shared with everyone, open, which again, our involvement helped, because whatever we did was seen. People got, after a few weeks, used to the fact that it was non-contractual, and they would start opening up. So we then, so that's how it went. And then obviously, I've had quite a few light bulb moments throughout my career, learning. First of all, obviously coming across all the Deming stuff, then the Goldratt stuff, then the Goldratt, especially the bottleneck of the system. I mean, that's probably one of the most powerful things that we don't think about enough, in construction. And then the recent sort of few years, I mean, I've been doing what most people do. We have an issue with productivity that is not moving. The dial is not moving. And you hear everyone is saying, we know what it is we've got to do. We know all the solutions. We know we've got to collaborate. We've got to be agile. We've got to be lean. We've got to, have psychological safety. We've got, endless. We've got to have leaders rather than managers. We've got to have servant leaders. I can go on, all these things, all of which I've tried. And you think, okay, yeah, all these things work. The last planner works, everything works. But what I've learned is that actually, okay, all of this works, but I've done on projects that I've helped. I'm 100% sure what I did help reduce the project time, but the project did not finish on time. So I'm thinking, so what is it that there needs to happen? Why these things are not producing? Then you think, actually, when you think about how we set the completion date, there's very little science, you could argue, is involved. And I've always thought that, the project will finish where the project finishes. When this goes back to the start of when I started learning about Deming, that, you've got to have the right system to get the right outcome. And if you follow the system, and it doesn't matter how good your people are, they're constrained by the system. People that say it's always about people. Yes, the people have to keep reviewing and improving the system, but ultimately the system will constrain what the outcome is. And Dan Jones used to say that, in construction we have highly skilled people, but really poor systems. And output. And there are a number of factors why, people are trying all these different things and they're not getting much benefit. So these are sort of my understanding, my learning over these years are the reasons. Number one is everybody thinks that by applying something, they're going to finish on time or better. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Do lean, but not necessarily. The second thing is people don't realize actually anything that you do in 90% of the time, in 99%, can only improve if you're focusing on shortening the project time. It only improve, you can only bring the end date forward by a day or two. By a day, 80% of the time, by only about 10% of the time, if you're lucky, by 2 days, very rarely by more than that. None of the stuff that people talk about improves project delivery in terms of project time. Like offsite. Offsite on its own, as a principle, will not deliver any improvement. Neither does BIM, neither does digitalization, neither this and that, whatever. So there are all these principles, everything that we try. So then you've got to ask yourself, none of these are any good? No, they're all good, except the fact that the way they're applied does not deliver the outcome that we want. Is a bit like my tennis. I play lots of tennis. Do you guys play?
A little bit.
Oh, good. Okay.
Mm.
So my view is that no project is ever finished on time because of the scientific endeavor or the intellectual, scientific, data-driven approach that led to it. That more often than not, projects complete on time purely by chance. Because the principles that are required for the project to finish on time align by chance. The same way as when I hit a good forehand, I've happened to bend my knees on time and turn my shoulder on time and followed through and kept my head still and watched the ball and all those things happened. I know all the bits, but I very rarely string them all together. So most of the time I hit dreadful shots. And that's the same sort of thing, if that makes sense, with delivering projects. You've got to have all these principles. And again, we apply a lot of things in isolation to each other. We work in a system with a lot of interdependencies. So therefore, everything we do has to be applied in the same way. We apply things randomly, on and off. We say, okay, we're going to have a bit of offsite. We'll have bathroom pods. The chance of a bathroom pod reducing the project time is actually very slim, because you've got to be on a critical path for any reducing the project time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
So, and any improvement, there's a lot of people now, we did all of this, time and motion, still fixers, carpenters, bricklayers. improving anybody's productivity on site, except the bottleneck activity, actually delivers zero time or cost improvement for the project. The only guy who benefits is the guy who fixed the steel. You help him fix more steel, he will earn more per hour, and that's it. Thank you very much. That benefit does not get passed on. And if you build something in a factory a million times faster than you do on site, that benefit doesn't get passed on as such to the system. So what else happens? A lot of times people do things in a half-hearted way. I mean, I love it. Nowadays, everything everybody says, or every report and every presentation talks about being agile. We've got to be agile. We've got to collaborate. We've got to be lean. And it's like people say, at the tennis club, you got to do top spin serves. And you say, do you actually know what the mechanics are of hitting a top spin serve? And most people I play with have no idea. And this is the thing, people talk about lean, and they go, "Oh yeah, we're doing lean," or so like, yeah, lean is not something you do. It's lean, I understood, is something you become. So
I might just jump in there, Ali.
go on. Yeah, am I going ranting on?
No. We love it when people rant on, because it means our job's easier, to be fair. But but I think it gives a great context. I just want to summarize a few things, because you started with some. We always get stuck with acronyms, and for some of the listeners, I think there's some great ones in there. TQM, critical chain, TOC, lean, and agile. You can all Google that or chat GPT it or whatever you want to do. So we don't have to go down the definitions path. But there was one thing you said, and I thought maybe if you could explain what you think that means, because I think it's a good one. You mentioned there was a book that you've done, and you talked about lean thinking. And I think, well, what do you mean, or what's your intention behind saying lean thinking? What is that? Is that something you said? It's not something you do; it's something you become potentially. What does that mean?
Well, basically, I mean, you've got to. What is lean thinking? Lean thinking is a label given to a study of how the production system works. Yeah. So what they've done is they've listed some of the basics, some of which are common amongst many of the, like Prince2 and Agile and whatever. Yeah. Again, it's using the sporting analogy. There's a lot of sort of basics the same when you're playing a sport that involves striking a ball. I don't know if that's a good one on analogy. Yeah, you got to follow through, keep your head still. If you're playing snooker, if you're playing golf, all those things. So there are a lot of common principles, basic mechanics amongst many of these things with these labels. Well, the lean has the 5 principles, which is identify the client value, then do your identify the value chain. Because one thing about projects is the value chain is really the program, and the program does not have non-value adding activities. Very rarely people add stuff in there. What's in there is the value adding work, which really the background stuff, in the backroom stuff, there may be lots of questionable things which you can automate and use AI possibly, which are questionable anyway. I mean, it's one of the things I learned, when automation was a big thing, before you automate, understand, what value it adds. So, and before we use AI, what are we going to use artificial intelligence for? But so, and the next one, which I think it's the key one, which I've been trying to communicate for years, and this is one of the 2 things that people don't talk about a lot or mention a lot as this being this solution. This is the biggest solution, because there are 2 things. If okay, let me go back to what I'm trying to do. I've, based on all this, doing experimenting, testing all this, I've created what's called a system called Timist. Yeah. And now people say, well, why are the people coming up with their own systems? It's like saying, why are people coming up with different cars? Why don't we just call everything a car? But okay, I've done this because I think the principles I put together, I was talking to somebody who was an expert in critical chain, and he was saying, we were discussing, and I said, look, the critical chain. I've used it. I was there the first day. It does not shorten this. There are things missing from those mechanics that does not shorten the project as much as it does as the time is with these additional sort of bits and pieces, if that makes sense. So what are the two things that are not very commonly discussed, which one of which is comes under the sort of the lean thinking, and that is organizing work one unit at a time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Henry Gantt did us a disfavor by coming up with a Gantt chart. It did you guys a favor, but did the rest of the industry a disfavor. Because, by the way, before this finishes, I'd like to know, I keep hearing about P6, and, this is one of the other things. And you got to use P6, I want to know by how much shorter does using P6, by how much does it shorten project delivery? You can't shake your head now, Val. We pay extra money for all that.
I mean, Oracle knows I'm no big fan. Unfortunately, I actually think it makes projects longer.
It does.
By the virtue of its complexity. And I actually also think it's like having a Ferrari parked in the garage, because about 1% of its functionality is used by projects. So it's a mix of misuse and complexity, because we can't help ourselves. I think it's a human trait, right, to make things difficult. And it becomes a very long-winded exercise to then integrate that back, especially if the program's big. I would say on smaller projects, not that I've been on many, but I'd say on smaller projects, it'd be quite good. But
Yeah, I think you're right, because it comes back to what you were saying earlier, Ali, about the application of the technology and tools we have at our disposal and how equipped we are or not with the art of executing them in a manner that shortens delivery, specifically on the time horizon. Because here's the thing, and listening to you is fascinating, Ali, because I totally agree with you. A lot of the tools and techniques, and call them what you want, methods, they actually are geared to identifying threats so that you can mitigate, delay, not shorten the program. How many times have we sat on projects and programs in risk reviews, and there are only threats, and no one comes with opportunities to shorten what has currently been set, right? And I think that's, for me, if I bring it back to sort of, I guess, more standard speak, that's what you're saying, because you're going, we have these great things, AI, machine learning, whatever it is, and we can look at them, but ultimately they're identifying potential threats which we should mitigate so that the program doesn't extend. They're not doing what we think they're trying to do and shorten what we set out to do. Is that fair to say? Am I interpreting that the correct way?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, most planning process, as I was told by the senior director, an MD of one of the top 3 organizations, top 3 contracting, the planning system is designed to protect the contractor, not to reduce the project time. All the planning process is as a protection and sort of defense. Does that make sense?
that does make sense, because when I started out in planning, one of the things they would talk about is, particularly, this is defense, right? So it was about contract integrity. So if you have to ring fence a significant piece of work, the program effectively locked in the scope. So that's what it did, right? And then change control was effectively the only way that you could bypass the controls in planning. So the planning process was fundamentally like a line of defense, if you like, of assurance, to make sure the scope could be delivered. So
the other thing that I find fascinating is that, and when I started out as a planner, I was taught that don't try and plan everything to the nth degree, because we're not good at it. We're not good at planning, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years ahead in detail. So why do we go and do it? We're really good at seeing the here and now. and planning that in detail and understanding, okay, what needs to be done in the next month, 2,
Well,
3
that's
months.
just doesn't. What is like saying a sat nav could only show you the next half an hour, but that's not how the system has to work like a sat nav. Unfortunately, to know what the bottleneck
Yeah,
of the system is, you need. Okay, let me put it to you this way: 80% of most programs are the same. Repeat.
In what field? In manufacturing, or you're saying generally?
In any project. Every floor is the same. Little tweaks here and there. Every railway line, every kilometer is near enough the same. Every bridge on a motorway is, it's quite, you plan one and then you tweak it for the next one. I don't know why, it takes so much effort and whatever. We should have all these sort of in the background. This is a bridge. I've done loads of bridges. Take this out. Oh, this has got a slightly bigger span. They got a this and that. And what I'm basically trying to say, actually, we need to move away completely. Well, again, what Henry Gantt was trying to do was trying to add structure to a chaotic environment, which was cell manufacturing with different skills being issued with job cards and trying to do the work aligned with the time allocated.
Yeah, and we're not good at that, right?
Well, that's chaotic, and that's why Henry Ford then came along. I think they tried that, and they abandoned it. That's why they created assembly line, saying we're going to organize the work one unit at a time. We're not, when you go to see Toyota, people miss out the fact that what they're looking at, those guys are not given a job card each, saying you got 2 minutes to assemble the wheel, you got 5 minutes to hang the door. You're working on one unit at a time, so that's what. Yeah. By not working on one unit at a time, there are two things to the project, and this is how the time is, what I'm approaching it, is stuff that could happen to us that causes delays, which we just talked about, all the uncertainty, the risk, the complexity, and most of which may not delay the project anyway. Most client changes may not, unless they hit the bottleneck, they may not actually impact the end date. And then there's the stuff that we do. And virtually 90% of what we do every day, it extends the project duration. And this is why I'm saying, this is what I'm standing for, that we need to start valuing the project time, monitoring it daily, accounting for it, what happens to it. It costs £70 million, around £70 million a day to deliver projects in the UK based on 100 billion a year spent. What's happening to that money? What's happening to the project day? How much of a project day is completed every day? What happens at the end of the day? I want to see like a flight arrival thing on my screen at the end of every day. If I was an MD if I was a client or an MD or contracting, I want to see what's happened to my project at the end of every day. Did the end date move out? Did the end date come in? How much of a day did you spend? I want to see a big board next to the safety board says, since such days, we have not lost a single project day.
I love that, because one of the pet peeves that I've been talking about for a long time, as Dale knows, is the month-end reporting cycle, which I think you would realize is you're waiting 30 days to find out that you're late 28 days ago, and there's nothing you can really do about it by the time you find out. So how do you feel about the business rhythm as such? Because most programs are geared towards what the client wants, and the client usually is set up in a contractual manner to review it once a month.
I know, and they review some PDF with stuff that's not been rescheduled with drop lines. Drop lines. If you use drop lines, means you extend the project time, guaranteed, 100%.
Drop lines. What's that terminology? I haven't heard that before.
Do you know, Dale, drop lines? When you show how much of the task you haven't done?
It's probably worth for the listeners, Ali, that you just briefly explain
Okay,
the
drop
basics.
lines,
That's
instead of rescheduling everything to see where everything moves, you then put in where the task should have been, how much should have been done, and how
Oh
much of it
yeah, I've
is not
seen that.
done. And then you
Yep.
sit there, people sit there in these monthly meetings and go, you haven't done enough of that. Yeah, but why you shouldn't be doing that at all? The priority of that is low.
I think you're right then, and this is probably the.
What do you mean I'm right there? Of course I'm right.
You
I
did
wouldn't be
say
coming
sense of
on
humor.
here if I
There
wasn't
it is. It
right,
comes out
Dale.
now. See?
Yeah, there's the sense of humor. But no, the key thing, I think, is that organizations and projects they mix up the difference between a project plan and trying to forecast what's going to happen. Because for me, certainly, when you mix up the two, you're trying to forecast potential areas where you can improve your plan. Your plan is your target. This is what you want to do. And I agree with you, that's easy to do. But in terms of then trying to reforecast it as you go and say, how can we improve on this? That is the tough thing, right? And we know what we want to do. We know the sequence. What you said it, 80% of projects are similar, except for when you get to projects like what's going on in Saudi Arabia, in the NEOM region, where they're novel. They're completely novel in many senses.
Well, what
But
are you building that's novel?
so I guess trying to build a ski resort in the middle of the Middle East where it's
Okay.
too hot, right? That's never been done before.
Yeah, but I mean, whatever the complexity, there's still activities, and quite a lot of those activities then end up repeating themselves on the program.
Absolutely. So you can plan for it, but you don't know the risks that are inherent to those
No, you don't know
conditions.
the risk, no. But
And
that's
that's my
why.
point.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
planning bit is easy. It's forecasting the risks that may happen that are really difficult.
But I mean, no system. Again, this is the system should work like a sat nav. Yeah, the sat nav, your sat nav may have in the background the possibility of any incident that could happen on your journey from A to B.
So
Yeah,
it
I go to
should, but does it? I guess that's the point.
Yeah, I
Does
go
it?
to
Do
Cornwall a
we
lot.
have the sat nav?
I go to Cornwall a lot, and I set the sat nav, and we have to agree as a family that once we set the sat nav, we're not going to argue with it. We're not going to redirect. Go, let's try something else. Stick to the system. Anyway, the sat nav may have in the background that there could be a car on fire or a lorry on his side. But what the sat nav can't tell me is when that's going to happen, where it's going to happen. Yeah. But what the sat nav now does, which he didn't do before, which when he first came out, when you were 60 miles away with, when you're doing 60, with 60 miles to go, it will tell you you'll be there in an hour. Agreed? But now the sat nav, if you're doing 60 and 60 miles to go, it will tell you you'll be there in an hour and a half because it picks up 3 bits of information from ahead of you. And one of which may be somebody saying there's a car on fire after junction 25 on the hard shoulder or on the fast lane. And then you then get that feedback. And that's what, the system, we don't use elapsed time to update progress. So most of the time, this using percentage complete nonsense, which everybody agrees is nonsense, but every project still continues on doing it and then doing these drop lines. So we need to use the only way to update the program to get the elapsed time is to engage all the supply chain involved, because they're the only ones. The carpenter is the only one who will know if the task that he's got left 2 days, if it's going to be finished in 2 days, or the timber is not going to arrive for another week. Anybody walking around marking up, that's QS work. That's for fine. That's for being paid, not for progress monitoring. Walking around like you're using a map. If you go to any project that the guy has got the program on the wall and marks it up, you can be 100% certain that project will not finish in the shortest possible time. If you go to any project when the project manager has got a list of all this number of resources on the day, and the first thing he tells you, I need 12 more of this, you can be sure that project is not going to finish in the shortest possible time. Because we think by maximizing the resources, and keeping them busy gives us the best outcome, the shortest project time. But actually is completely the opposite. The more people you have on site, the more utilized they are, means that you have to do the work in the larger batches, which is what that lean thinking principle is. The bigger the batch, the longer the project takes. So there are two things: what we practice daily and what happens to us. We're spending too much time on, what's going to happen to us. What is the risk? What's going to happen? But every day, everything we do, if you have package managers on projects, your project's going to take longer than it should. If you talk to subcontractors individually, your project is going to take longer than it should, because you are always, in all those situations, going to agree to give people greater run of work, which means you extend the project time. So 70 million pounds, the profit of the contractors is 20 million pounds a day. So there's the opportunity every day, there's 3 times as much that they could save. If you save time, again, let's go back to this important. Why am I now become obsessed with time? Because this is really only been, after all these years of doing all this, it's only been a light bulb moment a few years ago that improving the project time has so many significant positive impacts on so many things. A is a clear indicator of productivity, the rate of output, rate of completion. Is a rate of value to the client. Time is the biggest cost on a project. 70 to 80% of the project time is cost related. Risk, claims, most claims are, in terms of size, in terms of value, are the EOT claims, which are time related. Social value improves the shorter the project, the carbon footprint improves, cash flow improves. But the other much more fundamental, and that's why when I do this work, sometimes I get really good buy-in, is the fact that the only time when there's opportunity for all the supply chain to make more money is when you shorten the project time. The earlier the project finishes, because everybody then saves on prelims. Every other cost-saving approach, somebody loses out. Every value engineering approach, somebody ends up losing out. There's one thing at the expense of someone else.
Yeah. So, Ali, on that note then, obviously, the bigger the project, the harder the project. And if time is important, should we just go back to making projects small again?
Well, projects, we break things up. We have sections, but ultimately we need to know what the bottleneck of the whole entire system is every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I said there are two things that, as part of one is the fact that we've got to stop. We've got to say we're going to do 2 meters at a time. Yeah, not 2 days at a time. There are so many things. We have the Monday starts. You know about that? Everything is planned to start on a Monday. You look at any program, 99% of the durations are multiples of 5, because everything is, so if something finishes on a Tuesday, the next guy doesn't turn up till a Monday, so you use 3 days, 70 million pounds a day across many projects. And trust me, I reckon about 15 days a week, 15 days a year is lost across all the projects.
We had on that one, sorry to interrupt, we had a very interesting lesson when I was a planner. The master planner used to get pissed off because we did monthly reporting. You would love this, Ali. And, all the project managers would put the last day of the month for their tasks, and he would say no. Because what would happen is if they were late, then they would just move it by a couple of days. They said, oh, we're only a couple of days late, but they've moved it the whole month effectively. And you have this full slippage across, right? So then he had this rule. No one was allowed to end anything at the end of the month, which I thought was very, very clever, because I didn't know anyone else has done that since. But it's bang on your point. Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, that's all right. No, so then you have the half-day syndrome. If one guy finishes at 12 o'clock, it's very unlikely that the next trade will pick up the baton. And that happens a lot. We're talking projects, major project, you guys on prelims of what? 100 grand a day? 30 grand? Yeah. This is what and what happens when I go on a project? I go, okay, instead of telling me how many resources you have today, tell me what's happening to your bottleneck. He goes, oh, I don't know if there's anybody working on it or not. And you feel like shaking the project manager saying, let's go out there and have a look. That's costing you, what's your prelims here? You're sitting here in this office, all these people, it must be at least 15, 20 grand. And you're sitting there worried about how many electricians you have on site. So the key is not having work sitting there waiting. There's no point crashing out stuff when he sits there waiting. There's no point me going to a project and a guy saying we've just crashed out since you were last here 3 floors of the fire hydrant, fire whatever pipe work. Yeah, you know what I mean. I'm saying, oh no, there was a classic one, fan coil units. So I turn up on site. They go, since you were here, we've actually hung 3 floors of fan coil units. And I'll go, yeah. And he goes, aren't you impressed? I said, no. I said, how many have you piped up and wired up? None. I said, well, you've achieved nothing then. You haven't done anything that improves the project. Oh, I mean, you hear, or we brought the screeding forward by 2 weeks. By 2 weeks. And so how much is that going to bring the end date? Because something else, there's always another path, a day, maximum 2 days behind that will hold everything out. You cannot just bring things forward thinking by bringing one thing forward is going to, this is why you need this whole idea of continuous improvement then kicks in. No change, no system, technique delivers much more than a day. And so you got to, and the next thing is, again, this is a very recent light bulb moment because I've been doing what everybody else is doing, trying its individual tools in isolation and not getting that greater benefit. So the next thing is, and I think we talk about risk, and I was talking about to a risk manager the other day and say, where does a risk like this come in your schedule? I reckon, and I have no proof, the biggest risk to projects taking longer than they should and sort of running late is not prioritizing the work and doing the work in the order of priority. On every project, out of every 100 tasks, only 30 of them are usually resourced. Yeah?
Well, in Australia,
you look at your program on a project and see how many tasks there are, and then you go out there and you'll see only 30 of them are resourced. 30% around.
It's worse than that, Ali. In Australia, actually all mega projects, I could probably say, are not resourced. They're not resourced at all.
Oh,
it is an absolute.
Do you mean resource loaded or resourced?
No, you mean having somebody working on them?
Yeah, that's what Ali means.
Oh, yeah, you could have crews planned.
Yeah.
The resources aren't planned to the plan, though.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I think there's just a slight crossover there because Ali means resourced as in having the actual resources available, and you're talking about resource loading a schedule. But I think, yeah, I agree with that, and you can't deliver anything if you don't have the resources, right? And there's a couple of issues, right? There's a couple of issues. Sorry, and if we unpick what you're saying here, because I'm listening intently, because I'm trying to think, if I'm listening to you, what are the key nuggets to take away here? And I think for me, certainly, it's around, okay, we know what doesn't work. We know the benefits if we do things in a correct way. What are the causes? What are the root causes? Is it the fact that we don't have the skilled resources to be able to plan correctly? Is it we don't have the skilled resources to go out and actually say, update the plan accurately to identify things? Is it the fact that we have planners or no formal education that gives planners the rounded knowledge that you've accumulated over your many years? What are the root causes that's brought us to the current situation?
It is very little. I mean, we think projects run late because of poor planning.
Why do we think that? Why do we think that?
Because that's what managers think. There's always talk about poor planning. Actually, no, it's a poor execution. Your guys he has no idea what's going. Let's go back to this 130 idea, 30%. Yeah, 30% is more than what you need to do. But people from the outside look in and go, you only work on 30 out of the 100 tasks available. Yes, because actually the other 80% of it we don't even need to work on. If you use your program and press latest possible start on every task, do that tomorrow, how many tasks will there be left showing?
30%?
Only one. There will only be one task showing.
Depends how good your schedule is. But yeah, I get your principle.
Yeah. There's only one. If there's a proper critical path, everything is linked, which most of the time they're not.
I was about to say that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't do critical chain if everything is not linked. Everything is not validated by all the subcontractors. Anyway, we can go on. So you'll only have one task showing, which you must do on that day. That's the one that's costing you the 70 million a day. Most people don't even know what that is on a project. You ask a project manager what's driving the end date today. They goes, everything drives the end date today. We'll go, you then think, the science behind your thinking is just, and this is why I was saying, there's not enough intellect applied on project. Not that people are not intelligent enough. So AI cannot, there's nothing intellectually for AI, intelligence-wise for AI to take over when they takes over project delivering projects. We don't apply data or science. Anyway, going back to, so 100, like on a project recently, there were 40 areas for bricklayers to work on, 40 bricklayers, and they only had 8. So, and they were saying to me, oh, we're going to talk to the bricklayers. I'm going to say, no, 8 is more than enough as long as you work on the top 8 in terms of impact on the end date. You don't need to work on the other ones. Work on the ones and in terms of impact on the end date. Therefore, it is absolutely fundamental. This is my definition of project management. And that is knowing the impact of every available daily task on the end date. I'm not expecting somebody to walk around in their head, but I'm expecting when they walk around, there's a list of priorities in every floor and every room that said these are we color code things, red, blue, and orange and gray. And if you're a subcontractor and you do a gray, blue activity instead of a blue or red, you really have to come and answer at the weekly sessions. Why? Because you're impacting okay, let's think of it this way. You've got a program, right? We've got all these bars. Imagine all those bars on your program being cars, or the path of activities being trains. And imagine they're all moving all the time. They're moving. They're on the move. Either they're moving or the end date is moving towards them, those bars. Can you imagine that, what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't knock off the ones that are getting closer to the line, like Tetris I mentioned earlier, you will soon be in big trouble. If you don't know what to knock off, if you're knocking off the ones at the back, you then have no chance of finishing the project on time. No chance. It doesn't matter. The only difference, I think, between, we talk about complex project, with the more complex the project, the faster the bottleneck moves.
Yeah.
The bottleneck of the critical activity can move every day. And if your system doesn't tell you that, then, you are in big trouble. So
with that, Ali, with the, you mentioned bottlenecks and we talked about critical path and obviously that's important. How do you, for someone who's maybe wanting to do something like this or at least try, how do you identify bottlenecks? It's not an individual task. You need help
the
with
bottleneck, I try and move people away. We want to know, what sort of quantities of work they're going to do. We base it on, quantities of work, and then we try to then. The thing is that softwares only provide one benefit: the programming softwares, no matter which one. The simpler one, the better. The less reporting, the better. Because, your sat-nav doesn't give you reports. Your sat-nav doesn't have a camera on the back saying, what you covered. all these talks of helmets with sat navs, with cameras. I don't want to know what's happening. Most cars have computers that tell you how many miles you've done. Your sat nav doesn't tell you that. You're only interested in where you're going. And by the way, most people use their sat nav when they're going home, not because they don't know where they're going. It's because it tells you if there's a problem ahead. So does the system work like a sat nav? Does it tell you, where you're at? And the other thing is because with a sat nav is only one path of activities that it follows. On a project, you have many. You could actually know what drives the end date and work on it and beat the time that is set for it and still run late. Because it is so easy for other parts of activities to come and overtake. It happens all the time. The critical path shifts and moves all the time, and you need to know. The bottleneck, it determines the productivity, determines profitability, determines so many things, and your system has to know it. And to set it up, you need to have, we have 12 criteria for any program that is supposed to prioritize. The only benefit software provides is prioritizing work, and most planners I meet don't even know how it shows the priority. Honestly, I met somebody the other day, he didn't even know what there was a total slack column, for example. So how do you and you shouldn't be sitting around doing weekly plans. You should be issuing, this is your priority, this is it, this is the cut. The system says this is what you got to do. The system says this is the priority. So change the way, stop organizing the work around time, start prioritizing, and then all the principles we talk about, they all work, but they have to be. Most of the time, the other thing we do is we apply principles in order to reduce cost rather than reduce time. So, and also that we got all these things now about trying to improve quality. You can't shorten time unless you improve quality. So stop focusing on about all the defects, whatever. One of the things about reducing batches is it actually improves quality by around 90% because most errors are repeats of the same because of when you on a recent project 120 holes were made for a ventilation, and when the guy it was a university building, loads of labs, they hadn't tried to fit one of the ventilation vents on until they were all built, and the first one, the guy goes, no, this is the wrong size. So the bigger the batch, the greater the amount of work, the longer the duration. So you got a knockoff thing, and that. So you got all these principles. You have to all the things we talk about, like psychological safety, like team working, like collaboration. What am I going to see if there's a collaborative contract? What should I see when I walk on site? I don't see anything different. I can't tell what type of contract the project is. I want to see collaboration. I want to see people walking collectively with a priorities list. And this is where the idea of the ward round comes in. I think the ward round, the time-is system ward round. I am married to a doctor, consultant. I am... my son has recently qualified as a doctor, and I have to sit there at every meal time, listen to them discussing things. And one of the things they're talking about a few years ago is ward rounds. And you think, my wife, since she graduated, whatever, she's been doing ward rounds. And the ward rounds are considered one of the most effective clinical practices. It's done daily without fail. They're getting bigger and bigger. And the bigger they're getting, the better actually it is, because then there's less communication afterwards. So she doesn't have to then phone the pharmacist or speak to the aftercare because they're there. They walk patient by patient, discuss each one. They discuss, what the medication should be with the pharmacist. So this is what we do. I walk people around, and I believe that that's what people should do every day. collectively, not individually. There's no point individual project managers walking around. I've been on so many walks with senior people, heads of delivery from major Whitehall departments. We walk around and I go, all the delegates, and after about 10 minutes, I said, why are we walking? They're saying, we're going to see what's going on. I said, what do you mean, what's going on? How can you tell what's going on? Where is the, we produce priorities list here. Nobody's asked for a printout of that and say, okay, take me to that red activity. I want to see how that's going.
Yeah. You know what it is good for though, Ali? It's good for step count. But
it is good.
I wanted to ask you something before we sort of head towards the end of the pod.
I want to add one more thing at the end. Go on.
Sure. Yeah, we'll give you a chance for a final thought as well. We've been talking a lot about the do's, the don'ts. I just want to, I guess, be clear for the listeners that are listening to you. Who's your message for? Is it for every project profession, or are you targeting specific roles within the project? Because you've named a few things where, project managers blame poor planning. You've named things like, sometimes we don't plan correctly because we don't use the right techniques and things like that. Is it a broad spectrum that, everyone should be taking heed? Or are you focusing on specific roles that can really make a difference here?
No, I'm looking at it systemically.
Okay.
And so, again, a lot of people talk about systems and everybody has a different view of what a system is. I look at a system in two ways. There's what's called systemic, looking at things holistically, and then systematic. So holistically means collectively. So you utilize the collective wisdom. You walk to the problem. You don't sit around and say, oh, in that corner I have a problem. Which corner? Which floor? What problem? How big is it? Let's go and have a look at it. So, and then there's a systematic, which means having daily routines that you follow. So I've looked at every possible thing that could go wrong. How your checklist, somebody was talking about checklists. Am I allowed to mention name? In one of your podcasts anyway, the check sheet. Yeah. Adrian Dooley, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, he was talking about check. We have check sheets that you use to walk around like hospital wards, so that we have the priorities list that they walk around with. And you have to follow and you only have to look at we only encourage people. You can't look at every task. You only go and look at the top 5 or 6. They're what we call red and blues. Red is being critical, blue being within 5 days of driving the end date usually. And then you go and assess the batch size, you go assess how it's going, and then you should, at the end of every day, using this, you should be able to say to me, what's happened to the end date. Now I like
that.
And now the other thing is why is time is going to be most effective? Because time looks at all the little mechanics of achieving the fastest type of, for example, serve. That everything has lots of good things, and I've pulled in. And the other part about time that is absolutely fundamental is designed purely for shortening. I'm not going to reducing. I'm not going to go into why we call it shorten rather than reduce or speed up. Shortening the project duration only, and is designed that all these principles have to be applied interconnectedly daily, and it has to be visible. Otherwise, you'll not get the short. It's not something, I do a bit of this and I do a bit of that, and I use BIM here and I use, I may introduce whatever.
Yeah, we've spoken plenty about siloed working before on projects, and that doesn't help anyone, right? Everyone's got a great idea in these different departments, but they're not all working together. And totally agree with you. I think we had it was John Holdman a couple of years ago actually talking about systemic risk, and that feeds nicely into that as well. But look, Ali, I know you've got to go as well. You're short of time. So I want to, I guess, wrap up because first off, Just quickly, where can people get in touch with you to continue conversation? Do you have a website?
They can look up the www.timemist.co.uk. Timemist, we choose Timemist because Timemist is a person who cares about time, especially in the world of music. He monitors time.
Brilliant.
All the principles that I've talked about, most of which are common across many systems, they're all on there. There's a principles page, and each principle, if you click on it, explains what actually means. Like, we believe in there has to be intrinsic motivation has to be addressed to deliver the on a daily basis. That's why the collective walk helps, because people are involved, and you have to have psychological safety when people walk. You have to create horizontal accountability when people walk, and these are the number of principles. You have to know what the constraint is. So if you click on them, it tells you what it means and how you could apply it. And you can get in touch, and we can do 3 months trials, or if you guys are willing to find somebody who is willing to organize a debate, I'm happy to sit there and explain why, possibly that Timemist will deliver the project in a shorter time than Prince2 or Agile or whatever else.
Brilliant.
Or
We love
critical
that.
chain or
We
lean
love
or
the
whatever.
debate.
We
That's the
love the
challenge.
offer. Yeah, we love the offer of the debate, and I'm sure there's plenty of folks out there that are up for the challenge. So Val and I have taken notes. We'll get onto that. But look, it's been amazing to listen to your thoughts and opinions. We love your passion. We love the fact that you're not afraid to challenge, and that you've taken your views and you formulated them. You've thought about them. You've had quite a few light bulb moments of your career,
Losing you.
This is where you're at, and it's fantastic that you share that with those that are listening, because we only improve when we challenge the status quo on how we can be better than we were before. So really, really thank you for your time. It's been amazing. Before we let you go, though, any final anecdotes, thoughts that you want to leave the listeners with?
There's a kid who just beat Tetris. Did you
I heard
see
about
that?
this. Yes,
Yeah.
I did hear about this. Amazing.
Employ him.
We're on it.
Yeah.
We're on 2 actions.
He will be the best
Absolutely.
project. So the 3
Absolutely.
things to bear in mind: the system. If the sat nav doesn't do it, don't do it. It has to work like a sat nav. Think Tetris, or the train coming. Think the tasks are moving all the time on your whatever, and think ward rounds. And the key is, we are encouraging people to focus collectively focus on the system and not on each other. Yeah. Stop managing each other. Focus collectively on the system. Follow the system. If it's the right system, you'll know. If it's the wrong system, then you change it every day. You will get the best outcome. And It's been lovely talking to you too. I'm sorry I've sort of talked non-stop at times without
we loved
breathing.
it.
And
I appreciate it, Ali. We'll have you back definitely anytime.
my bad jokes were not. I didn't get a chance to throw too many of those in.
No, we'll get the debate. So keep all of your bad jokes for that debate.
Okay.
And
That's
we'll
true.
see. Yeah, we'll see if your challenger gets your jokes too. But no, like I say, it's been absolutely fantastic for both of us to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your views, and I guess the listeners will take a lot of this as well, because one of the things we find is that the more we give perspective to those out there, the more we share, the more we improve projects. So really, really thank you for your time on this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, people are, I'm just learning and I'm trying, and this is what's coming to me. And people are saying, like you've seen some of the comments, that they're sort of mind-moving ideas. What they're just things that the more you do things, you realize how the best thing is. So when will I get my ticket to come out there to help you guys out?
We should talk after we end this pod.
Yeah, I'm expecting
On
a first-class flight. See you tomorrow night.
tomorrow night. But look, on that note, folks, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing the best part of an hour with us. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please do help us pay it forward and share a link to this episode on your favorite social media. Once again, a massive thank you to our guest, Ali Mafi, and thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. From me and Val in person, it's bye for now.
See you guys.